Hey folks, Kevin Inoue here. Welcome back to another PewTube, the not so regular series that I try to keep up on this YouTube channel. My primary motivation in posting these videos, other than just an innate desire to be helpful to folks, is to help kind of preemptively answer some of the questions that come up with my prop weapons rental business, Fight Designer LLC. Now, I'm certainly open to requests, suggestions, questions that you might have, put down in comments, email me, etc. But today what I wanted to talk about a little bit is some of the differences between the different versions of the Glock as demonstrated mostly through the Umarex gas blowback versions, because they've done a great job of securing trademarks and being as authentic as they can. Unlike, for example, some of the blank firing versions that we have. Unfortunately, we can't get the Umarex blank firing ones in the US, so I don't have a good licensed blank firing version of a Glock right now. And I'm also going to follow up on a previous video about spring-powered shell-ejecting blowback Glocks. That was a bit of a failure, but I've got the replacement now, so we'll see how that goes. All right, let's dive in. So one question you might have when you're looking at some of the gas blowback versions of the Glock that Umarex has licensed for the airsofts. They have CO2 and they have green gas. My general preference, my bias is towards green gas because you can top those off between takes, whereas CO2, you use it until it's dead and then it's gone. Like as soon as you open it up, it's all gone. You puncture the seal on the CO2 canister. So while these kind of have their purpose, they do sometimes give a little bit of a harder kick. They can last a little bit longer on one full load. They're not as well made, I think. Some of them don't blow back quite as far. You can tell that it's this, BB thing up top on some of them. It just sounds a little tinnier, but it's not bad and it'll do the job. And these Glock 17s, I'm going to focus on the 17 for the most part here. They don't specify generation. I'm going to guess this is a Gen 4 because of the finger grooves. We'll get more into that later. But they do in general have trademarks, and I've shared some information on these before as well. I'll put a link below as well as at the end of this video to my initial review of some of the gas blowback Umarex Glocks. I do think these are a great choice for independent film, and sometimes if you can get away with being creative about the sound design, for live theater as well. But getting into the green gas, we have at least a couple of options, and now I can show two of them here, those being the Gen 4 and the Gen 5. Now, Glock numbers things through patent number, so the 17, 45, 22, whatever, 19, none of these have anything to do with caliber. They really only have to do with the patent number. But then they have different generations within that patent number. So the Glock 17 is our standard sort of police duty pistol for generations now. But they've gone through a number of generations of Glocks as well. So we have here a Glock Gen 4 and a Glock 17 Gen 5, both from Umarex. And I thought it might be interesting to take a look at the differences. Now, there are some things that are different between the actual Glock Gen 4 and actual Glock Gen 5, which I frankly don't care about for what I do with theater and film. So, for example, stuff about the barrel and accuracy doesn't matter to me because we're not shooting anything anyway. Trigger pull, not that big a deal to me. I'm not too picky about our trigger pulls as long as they do the job, right? So the main differences to me are going to be cosmetic in terms of what we see in these replicas. So yes, they do have Gen 4 versus Gen 5 written on the slides, the similar markings, Glock, 9x19, etc., etc. The two most immediately recognizable differences probably are the finger grooves. The Gen 5 does not have them, the Gen 4 does. And the flared magwell and kind of finger cutout here to facilitate magazine changes, which the Gen 5 has and the Gen 4 does not. Now, I actually kind of I kind of like the finger grooves on the Gen 4 here, but that's just because they happen to line up with my fingers. Whereas in some versions of the replicas, for example, the Rite Glocks that I've reviewed in a previous video, they have grooves that just don't fit my fingers. My fingers are too big, the grooves are too small, and it feels really awkward. So if this doesn't happen to fit your hand, the Gen 5 is going to be a much better bet. And so some of that's just going to depend on your actors. Some of it's also going to depend on what rubber dummies you have easy access to that can double it, or what blank firing versions you have access to that can double it. Because when we're making movies, often we want a hero version for close-ups. I think these are great for that because they have full trademarks. We often want a firing version for when we really want that muzzle flash and slide motion and a shell casing kicking out and a big boom that our actors respond to, so we can see that look on their faces, and we know that they're not just making empty motions with a rubber prop, right? So we've got basically our firing effects version and our hero version. These are also great for close-up shots because it's just compressed gas, and as long as you are making sure that no BBs can be loaded from there, these are perfectly safe at close range. I wouldn't do it right into someone's eyes, but into the back of the head, execution style shots, things like that. These are a great choice for filming those. So they're relatively safe. But then sometimes you also need something that you can wrestle over and throw and drop on the ground and not worry about, so then you need a dummy version, and occasionally you need other effects versions for special gags. So some of this will just depend on what you can fit there. Holsters are going to be pretty much the same. I mean, ergonomically, the slide is pretty darn similar. There is a little difference in the sights that you will see, but for the most part, that's not going to affect holsters because it's either the pattern of the sights. We've got this kind of U cutout on the Gen 4 and the dots on the Gen 5. And also the sights are a little bit thicker front to back on the Gen 5 than they are on the Gen 4. But thicker front to back makes no difference in terms of holster fit or things like that. Otherwise, I think the proportions are exactly the same. So all your accessories should be pretty much similar. The Picatinny rail is a little bit wider in the Gen 5. The Gen 4 and some of the earlier ones, I know from using, for example, some of my Olight tactical lights on these, you do sometimes have to have a different attachment to make it fit with the rail with these, because it's a slightly narrower than standard Picatinny groove on the tactical rail on the front of these. So if your tactical light of choice isn't made to work with Glocks, you may have some problems with Gen 4, whereas this Gen 5 is a wider groove, so I imagine it'll work with pretty much anything that can work on any kind of Picatinny rail. So that's going to be a little bit more standard, which is nice. So far for accessories, Gen 5 is a win. This magwell thing, it's kind of fun. So flared magwells have been a standard of race guns, like IPSC competition guns and things for a while now. Often it's an aftermarket thing that you attach to the magazine well of the firearm. But in this case, it is kind of built in. So you've got this little flare here already, which fits the hand nicely. Again, for me, if you happen to have larger or smaller hands, it may not fit as well for you. So you may not like the fact that flares out a little bit there. But it does make sliding these in just that little bit easier to be able to, if you're at Maglock, slide that in without having to look too closely. So there's points for that, I suppose. As well as this little cutout in the front, which kind of does the same thing in terms of being able to pull the old magazine out. If you have an empty magazine and you want to drop it, these kind of drop free anyway, so I'm not too worried about that, but it can, I suppose, facilitate that change if you want. Now, again, any of these are going to be the same, I imagine, internals for the Umarex gas blowback version. I doubt they changed anything internally with these. And you get a nice crisp blowback. They function fairly well. It's something for actors to respond to, but it's still just compressed gas. With all of these, the magazines are interchangeable, which is nice, so you don't have to worry about is it a Gen 4 magazine or a Gen 5 magazine. But the Gen 5 magazine does have this little bit of a flare in the front. These magazines are made to be a little bit more favoring accuracy over ease of use for gas blowback. So whereas some gas blowback firearm props from airsoft versions will have the valve visible on the bottom, this does not. It has the Glock logo. It looks like the base plate of an actual magazine. And to load these, you have to push in, as you would with a real mag if you were taking it apart, push in the little pin, slide this out, and then you can get at the magazine fill valve. So it's a little less convenient to fill. The other drawback with that potentially is the spring that helps push that pin in to keep the magazine base plate on is the same spring that pushes up on the follower. So with some of these gas blowbacks, you can kind of decommission them by pulling out that string, pulling out the follower, whatever else. So there's no way that this magazine can feed BBs up there if somebody decides to do something stupid and bring some plastic BBs to your set. With these, you can't do that without also interfering with the magazine. So with these, what I'll usually do is just jam some foil in there like I did there. It's not a permanent change to the firearm, so this could be put back into firing BBs kind of mode if somebody wanted to do that, if I wanted to sell some, or if somebody wanted to mess with a prop in in a not very smart way for use on set. But it does the job. It stops the slide from locking back and from thinking it's out of ammo, because we don't want to put actual ammo in it. And these are made to fire BBs again, so they are made to have the slide lock back when they're out of ammo. Now, there are, of course, other options available. One popular one is the Glock 19. This is sort of a mid-size. It's not the compact like the 26, but it is a popular carry size because it's a little bit smaller than the 17. And it's smaller in a number of directions. Partly the slide and upper and lower are shorter that way. Also, the grip is a little bit smaller. You can see it just doesn't stick out as much. So both of these combine to make it a little bit more comfortable to carry, a little bit more concealable. The cop show that I did with the female protagonist a few years ago, we used the Glock 19 for her as her main firearm, and that worked just fine. These don't specify generation. I don't know enough about Glocks. I don't own an actual Glock, so I don't know if Glock 19 has had different generations, but it's set up a lot like the 17 with these finger grooves, although with this shorter grip, I will say these finger grooves don't line up as well for my hand as they do on the 17. And so for some people, they felt like this grip was a little too small, so one of the things Glock did was come up with the Glock 45, which is not a 45 caliber. Again, they use patent numbers, not anything that would actually make sense in terms of understanding the firearm when numbering them. And I fairly recently got an airsoft version from the Umarex of the Glock 45. Recently enough, I haven't removed the orange tip yet. And the 45 has the same slide length, same upper length as the 19, but the grip length of the 17. So this gives you a full-size grip with a slightly more compact barrel and upper. So it's another sort of compromise option for carry. This also doesn't have the finger groove, so it's a little bit more flexible in that sense in terms of hand size. And so this is another nice option if you are carrying concealed in a hip holster. It is going to stick out a little bit more there. It does also have the same flared magwell that the Glock 17 Gen 5 had, although it doesn't have the cutout in front. So again, they're all a little bit different. It does have the slightly wider groove in the Picatinny rail, the accessory rail up front, and it has the Gen 5 style sights as well. So we've got a couple of different versions here. Honestly, on my website, I'm probably just going to call all the Glock 17s Glock 17, and maybe I'll write underneath that I have this many Gen 4s and one Gen 5 available in current inventory, or something like that. Because honestly, most filmmakers, they're going to look at their thumbnails, they're going to see that there's like 6 or 7 things on there that look like, it's a Glock. And they're not necessarily going to know that, okay, those are the Glock 17s with trademarks, those are the Glock 17s without trademarks, those are the Glock 45s, those are Glock 19s, those are the Glock 18Cs. These are the ones that are made to look like the Glocks that are not actual Glocks, but are made with Glock-style parts and patterns. Often these days, the real ones done with the 80% receivers, so people are kind of making their own, maybe from Timberwolf or other companies, because I've got some of those. It's a popular style, and with popularity comes imitations, sincerest form of flattery, I guess. So there's a lot of things that look kind of like Glocks. But even within the Umarex now, we have a fairly wide range of choices. If you are trying to use these for training purposes, it totally makes sense that you would want one that would match your actual firearm so that you can really get that muscle memory of exactly where everything is and how it feels. For props use, probably doesn't matter as much, but if for some reason it does and you need to double something, if we need to double a hero prop or whatever, now we have a couple of different options at Fight Designer LLC. We've got the 45, we've got the 17 Gen 4, 17 Gen 5, the 19, and the CO2s, which don't even say what generation. And that's just in gas blowback. Plus we have some WE gas blowbacks, Glock 17s, and some, things like the Timberwolf and the APS and other versions. So there's a lot of choices. All right, one last thing. I promised a follow-up of these cheap Chinese ones. I did an unboxing video of this earlier, which I uploaded hastily in part because this company wanted proof that it was not working and that it stopped working right away. And to their credit, they sent me a replacement. So I just got that in today. So again, what these are these spring-powered. I mean, they just use springs or in the case of the homemade DIY 3D printed ones, rubber bands. And so there's a little bit of a tension created when you first pull the trigger. And then when that tension breaks, when the trigger breaks, it releases it and makes the slide go back, which is pretty cool. So what that means is you have essentially a blowback prop that does not have any projectile and does not require any gas or electricity, which I think is pretty cool. Unfortunately, as we saw last time, they break super easily. They're pretty cheaply made. They're not very reliable. But I have another one now. Lesson learned. I got some follow-up from my friend Hugh in the Netherlands and some other folks about these types of props. Don't chamber around. That will mess it up. There is no chamber in these. And so if you try to put the magazine in and chamber around, you actually end up doing a double feed and you're going to end up breaking something. So now that I know that, let's try to demonstrate a couple more of these. We'll see if I can get through 3 or 4 rounds without either a double ejection like I had last time or a breakage or anything like that. I'll go ahead and load up a full magazine. Why not? And I did try to take apart the other one and see if I could figure out what needed fixing, what didn't work, how to fix it. I'll throw some pictures up here. I thought I found at least one place where maybe the spring had come off and maybe that was the problem, but then I could never get all of it back together again, so I don't know. I'm not entirely sure what that is. So I have one now that's still in pieces and I couldn't get it back together. But hey, learning experience. So here we go. Not chambering around, sliding the magazine in, and let's see if we can eject some out of this weird Glock 21 that has the switch of an 18C and is all cheap plastic. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and slide lock. So that did actually work. So, you know, if and when it works like it's supposed to, you know, this cost me, what, 20, 25 bucks, something like that. So about the same price as your average airsoft spring gun. And it feels similar in terms of the cheap plastic, but it has blowback and ejects casings. So between a cheap airsoft spring gun and this, I'm gonna probably go for one of these. It's a pretty cool option. And yeah, I could probably paint it up to make it look a little bit better. None of this is engraved, this is just painted. And you can obviously see the seams in it and things like that. So, you know, chances are good if I wanted to put the time into it, especially if I figured out how to take these apart and put them back together again without messing it up, that I could probably get them to look a little bit better. But it's not bad. And it does look, you know, if you ignore the switch, it looks a lot like a Glock 17 Gen 4. Since that's what we were just talking about. And these come in a variety of colors, but I went for the one that seemed the most realistic. Actually, this might be a Gen 3, given that back check pattern. This might be more like a Gen 3 or a Gen 2. I don't have any of those in Umarex to compare to. So, happy ending to that story. A range of Umarexes to choose from. And yeah, that'll do me for now. If you listen carefully, you've probably heard some weird buzzing in the background. That's my 3D printer. I'm experimenting with some 3D printed designs. This is a matchlock that's not quite finished yet, but it's a matchlock Nerf gun that also has a functional wheel lock device that hopefully I'll get finished and be able to fix up and show you next time. But there's some interesting things out there that I've been trying out with the 3D printer with mixed success. So I'll share that another time. Other things I meant to do, I taught at the Brawl of America Stage Combat Workshop up in Minnesota a couple weeks ago. I really should have done a workshop report and interviewed some of the folks up there who are working on stuff, because I kind of co-did some firearms things there, as well as mentoring someone else who's coming up and doing his own stuff, and teaching some of my own stuff in the John Wick style of disarms and retention and takedowns. So maybe I'll talk a little bit more about firearms training another time. And then I've got the next thing coming up that's for adults. I've got some youth camps and things too, is Combat Con in Vegas. So I'll maybe talk more about that later and share some from there in late July. Until then, have fun, play safe, look good, stay sane, creative, stay healthy. And if there's anything that I can answer for you, drop it in the comments, like, subscribe, let me know.